We can try as hard as we want to be the best parents we could possibly be, the best spouses we could possibly be, the best friends, the best pastors, the best members, right, that we could ever be. The truth of the matter is, the bottom line is, what Abby just prayed is so profoundly true. We all fall short. Only God is always there for us, and exactly, precisely the ways and the timing that we need, that our soul, our spirit needs. William Massey is a found object sculptor in Atlanta, Georgia, whose art has appeared on our bulletin covers before and is, yet again this week, deepening our relationship with the Almighty. Williams says about today's bulletin cover sculpture, House 11, I used to obsess over all the stuff I could acquire to fill my home. At the beginning of my adult life, I was clawing for silver, status, and stuff. This sculpture, William Massey says, is a self-portrait. I created a dwelling with residual bits and pieces from my life over an entire year. But its value isn't on the outside. William Massey continues, as I continue to reflect, I believe we can spend our whole lives working for material stuff to make us feel fulfilled. But it will never last. What I am slowly realizing is we can build a home in our heart, incorporating all of our junk, all of our brokenness. And if we ask God to fill it, we will be full. In 1888, Alfred was among the wealthiest men in the entire world, right up there with the Vanderbilts and the Rockefellers. In that same year, Alfred opened his newspaper and read his own obituary entitled, "The Merchant of Death is Dead." The obituary written was obviously an error. It was in response to the death of Alfred's brother, Ludwig. Alfred was an inventor of dynamite, and he owned armaments manufacturers. And he would live for 8 more years after that obituary was written. Imagine reading your own obituary and learning that you would be remembered in such a negative way. Alfred Nobel responded by changing his will and using his great fortune to create the Nobel Prizes, to recognize significant accomplishments that brought the greatest benefit to humankind. Reverend Dr. Millie Snyder says, I wonder if Jesus' parable functions a bit like Nobel's obituary to us. In response to a question about his inheritance, Jesus told this parable about a rich man who builds larger barns to store the abundance with which he had been blessed. The man has a conversation with himself, giving his soul a dose of hedonistic, self-indulgent permission. He says to himself, "Self, you've done well. You've got it made and can now retire. Take it easy and have the time of your life." The man doesn't realize that this will be his last night before he dies. And his stored treasures will be left sitting in the barns. We don't know if he had children, but I can promise you one thing, and you probably experienced this too. They'll probably be fighting over the inheritance, how to divide the abundance. Are you as intrigued as I and Dr. Snyder that the man talks to himself? He doesn't talk to anyone else about how to handle his abundance. He doesn't talk to his family. He doesn't talk to his friends. He doesn't pray for God's guidance. What does this tell us about God's will for our dealing with our blessings, with our abundance? Do we seek wise counsel of our beloved community when we face a decision about the abundance that we all have? A book that the men's room and I read about 3 books ago, Christ in Crisis, suggests that our budgets are moral documents. When you develop your budgets, whether at home or at work, are they moral documents? What is the story they tell? Do we seek God's will for our budgets? Do we seek wise counsel about what needs in our communities we might fill? As long as we're talking only to ourselves, our budgets will not be moral documents. They will reflect our own conveniences and our own preferences. The good news is that Jesus told the parable to a man who is trying to get his share of his family inheritance. The parable comes as an opportunity, a second chance for the man to question everything. What priorities do his intentions reflect? What needs are being ignored? The parable also comes as an opportunity, a second chance for the man to consider his own legacy. What will his obituary say? That he had large barns full of silver, status, and stuff? Or that his budget, his legacy, his life was a moral document that shared Christ's love and built up God's kingdom on earth? As a pastor who has officiated a lot of funerals, I can assure you that his original intentions and his second chance represent 2 very different journeys, two very different lives, two very different outcomes. If he listens to Christ's advice, he and his family and his community will be blessed. A blog writer nicknamed Cheeky Kid collected a list of 100 funny first world problems. I'm only going to dig into a couple of these. I won't ask you to raise your hand if you've ever worried about or complained about any of these. But I think each one of us will recognize one, if not more, of these in ourselves. Have you ever made any of these complaints? My house is such a mess. There's stuff everywhere. My walk-in closet is not big enough. Polishing the marble in my house is such a thankless job. There's too much ice in my iced venti mocha cookie crumble frappuccino. The portion sizes in this restaurant are too big. My house is so big that the Wi-Fi signal is weak in some rooms. There's nothing good on TV right now. And my favorite, I can't believe I bought a toaster with no bagel setting. Believe me, those are only problems in the first world in which we live, where silver, status, and stuff get in the way of the abundant, overflowing life that Christ came to give us. Friends, you don't want to reach the end of your life and discover that you've wasted it. You don't want to discover that God had a greater plan and a purpose than you or your loved ones could ever imagine, and you ignored it. So make your life, your budget, and your legacy a moral document, because God has infinitely greater plans for our lives than the never satisfied, always breaking, perpetually upgrading pursuit of silver, status, and stuff. Amen? Amen.